welcome back to The Pursuit, everybody. Jeff Hutchin along with John Saborov, and we've got an awesome guest with us today, a really good friend of mine. John DeYoung is on board, and I don't even know where to start, honestly, John, with what you do, because
we could take the rest of the episode on what he does.
Yeah, exactly. He's been such a huge support for us in the launching of The Pursuit. He's kind of been our artistic director and advisor and counselor and therapist and
film producer, graphic designer.
Short of subscribing drugs to us to help with our anxiety, I think you've done just about everything else. So, my brother, we love you, my man. We're glad you're with us. Thanks for joining us. But today, we're going to kind of head maybe in a unique direction and talk about an area that you have a great amount of interest in, and you've committed a significant amount of your life, if I could use the word, in the pursuit of battling trafficking.
Yeah.
Specifically in India, but trafficking as a whole, because there's a lot of things you do around it. So let's just dive off the edge right here and talk about. Let me ask you this: what first drew you into this cause?
That's a great question. I think what drew me was about 8 years ago. I was entering. I had gone to India, Calcutta, India, multiple times through Valor Christian High School's missions program, short-term missions program, and I had heard about human trafficking, and I also heard that it was in two categories: labor trafficking and then sex trafficking. And I'm like, okay, so there are people out there who are being trafficked, are enslaved to make a profit for a company. So they're working for a company at a very maybe for no money or whatever they decide to do. Then there's this exploitation of sex with people, and there's a lot of money in that as well. So I was as I got introduced to it, I started just asking a lot more questions. But I'm excited to talk about this because one of the things that is difficult about this topic is that this topic is very difficult. It is dark. It is not pretty, and it's grotesque because it sort of reveals the heart and the root of our sin and a lot of other things that mankind, not just men, but mankind is involved in, and we just continue to perpetuate this sin and this grossness and grotesqueness that we keep doing, and the crime itself is growing. You know, so it's not getting better; it's getting worse along the way. So 8 years ago, I'm doing a mission trip with about 20 Valor students, and we're in Mother Teresa's home of the home and dying, of the dying and destitute. And we had just gotten through the temple. We had just gone through the Kali temple, which is a Hindu god of blood and destruction and death. So we got a chance to watch the goat sacrifices right there, you know, and so the children experience real life animal sacrificing as they're giving the blood to this demon god because they want to keep her from coming out at night and killing their children. So the best way to do it is give her blood, and so that's it. And so you're standing in the middle of a temple, and you're literally standing in the Old Testament. I'm telling you guys, you're there. The priest is banging the gong, and there's money being thrown, and they're drinking alcohol and all of this. And then the family brings in the goat, and they put blood all over the goat, and they pray over it, and then they tie the goat up, and it just goes the head, and blood goes everywhere, and the blood goes on the family, and the kids have to drink the blood, and all of this is happening, and you're watching this. And then the story also goes that there's young girls in the temple, because in the Kali says if you have sex with a child, it forgives your sins. So there's just a line of people going in either to have sex with the child or the temple. They call them Devidachis, but the temple of prostitutes, and they're young. They're very young. And then people giving money, and so not everyone's having sex with children, but they have their, whatever the priest is telling them they have to do that day. As you walk out of that and you go maybe, I'm telling you, Jeff, maybe 10 yards. You guys are football refs. You know what 10 yards is. And you're standing at the doorsteps of Mother Teresa's home and dying destitute. So you have this space, and you know the spirit realm is that close. Evil and good, just right there. So that's a fascinating thing. All that to be said, I ended up in the Mother Teresa home, and they were renovating it, and so there were no patients there that day. And so we were like, okay. So the children went over to with another leader, and they headed over to the women's side to pray for them. I was praying over the men's side. There's about 60 beds there, and they were just renovating the floor at the time. And I looked behind me. I turned around because I felt someone watching me. I'm like, and I turned around, and there's, I think, about an 11-year-old Indian child there with a little baby. You see him on the streets, and you see the pictures of the poor, begging. And so she's a beggar, and she's, I think she's about 11, but she's holding probably a, 1 or 2-year-old baby, and she's asking for money, and I'm like, you know what? No, I'm going to give you a granola bar. Would you like a granola bar? So I reach in my backpack and I have a granola bar. She's like, no, I want money. And I'm like, well, how about some food? And she's like, no, I want money. And I'm like, okay. And if you know anything about short-term mission trips, you want to be very careful how you interact with the culture, because you're there to you don't want to cause any problems, right? And so you typically don't want to give cash to the beggars. You want to give them food, or you want to help them along, or maybe some medicine, or all those types of things. And so I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll let you think about it, right? And so I know there's this little game going on. So I turn back around and pray for the beds again. And I turn back around to look at her and to maybe ask her again, would you like the granola bar, right? And trying to do that. And I get a little bit closer, and I realize, wait a minute, she doesn't have the baby anymore. So I'm like, oh. So maybe that was her sister, or, however, I don't know her situation exactly. So I'm like, okay, and I kind of get down on my knees. So now I'm going to get eye level with this young girl. And I'm probably about 5 feet from her now, and I look, and she has makeup on her eyes. And I'm like, why do you have makeup on? Now, this is what I'm thinking. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to, in my reach, just give her the granola bar, and she's like, no. And then she lifts up her skirt. Now she has no panties on, and I'm like, what? And, the reaction is I spin around, and I know I startled her, because I'm quick. So I was just like, whoa. And I was just like, and I just kind of threw the bar to the ground, and I just sat there, and I'm like, what just happened?
I would imagine, if I'm putting myself in the position of somebody watching this right now, that's exactly the question.
Yeah.
Wait, this is happening in the world?
Yeah.
And maybe the second category of people is, well, yeah, I believe that's happening over there.
Yeah.
We have this separation that says, well, it's not here. Mm-hmm. And God's called me here, and I'm worried. I'm so tied up with my mortgage and my career and my this and that.
Yeah.
How do I have time for that? But that's happening.
Yeah.
And there's some tie to what's happening here, isn't there? Through that.
Absolutely. And I think, later that night, I'm with my 2 other adult leaders, and I'm really confused. I am really confused, because I started calculating in my head, she was okay doing that. Mm. So what was her life prior to the moment I met her? Mm. And that started really wrecking me, because I couldn't figure that one out. I couldn't picture what it takes for 11. Anyone watching this, just think of an 11-year-old kid, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever it is, whatever race, but just an 11-year-old innocent child doing that. And what had to have happened prior? Mm-hmm. What had to have happened prior? So it was that night. I really asked God. I'm like, I think I want to fight this, but I don't know how. Mm-hmm. Like, what am I going to do in India, right? Because I only thought it was in India, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam. I hadn't heard about it in the United States yet, right? And I've heard a little bit, like, the Asian girls are being shipped over, and I hear about the exporting and smuggling, but I didn't know to what depth sex trafficking was actually happening globally, and I did not know that the United States is the #1 consumer in the world of sex. Mm-hmm. We are the best at it. And I discovered that later on. I didn't discover it that night. So I kind of really opened up my hand to God and said, what do I do? But I'm here, and I kind of told God, because I was frustrated, I was terribly torn. I said, as long as I have breath, I will do something. I don't know what it is. I know I can do film. Maybe I'll do a film about it. I know I can do a website. Maybe I'll build a website. I didn't know. About a year and a half later, I taught film and dance at Valor. I brought Valor kids. So what I started doing is changing my trips. Now we have a component. I'm going to educate you, right? I'm awesome, but I'm going to educate you, and I'm going to walk you through one of the largest red light districts in all of Asia, right in the middle of Calcutta. 50,000 women recorded, we don't know how many, in a 10-block radius, selling themselves. Now you're talking children all the way up, right? So about 3 o'clock in the afternoon is the safest time to go, because there's a lot of lunch business going on, and there's like this nap time, and then it starts again about 4 o'clock. So about 3 o'clock, we take the kids out of the cars, and we walk them through for about 15 minutes, and they get to see eye to eye all these young girls wearing the same clothes like they do. Eye to eye. This is the life that they live. And then that spurs a lot of conversation along the way.
You were talking before the show about the first step is going from unawareness to
aware.
That's
Yeah.
what you did, isn't it?
Yeah. So there's a lot of, I think if you say human trafficking, funny story, you want to talk about this. So we did a video at Valor. And after that, so I was like, I want to find out what kids know about human trafficking. Mm-hmm. And so I asked a student who was in the broadcast class, I said, hey, just go around and interview a bunch of Valor kids and ask them, have you heard of human trafficking? What is human trafficking? Mm-hmm. And then give me your thoughts as kids and students, right? Every teacher had a pretty good answer about human trafficking. But generally across the board of Valor kids, very much to your unaware, one kid was like, well, is it when a lot of people are going through a hallway and there's like a traffic jam?
My goodness. Yeah.
And we didn't want to make fun of them, but we got maybe out of 50 or 60 interviews, we might have had one or two kids who were like, well, wasn't it like, sex trafficking, labor trafficking? Like some were educated. But that's 90% didn't have any, never even heard about it, right? And should we? Maybe so. Maybe we should. I don't know. I know I was just like thrown into the fires of like, this is human trafficking. And here it is right in front of your face, John. And I'm like, whoa. Okay, let's do something about that. So, but then I started taking those kids through that to change their perspective or open their eyes.
Well, I think, let me jump in here, because I think there's a lot of times, I'm trying to again put myself in the perspective of our viewers, that there's probably times where all of us can think of moments where we got exposed to something that we weren't aware of.
Yeah.
So we went from that place of ignorance to now awareness. And it's that realization, like you had that night when you were in India, going, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
I now have new information that I didn't have 5 minutes ago, and we're stricken with that thing within us that says, what am I going to choose to do with this? Yeah. I'm either going to take it and I'm going to put it in the back seat and hope it just kind of goes away, or I'm actually going to insert myself into this issue. And then, as we were talking before we turned the cameras on, we're literally coming off of this issue where this man was just killed in the streets.
Yeah.
By the Minneapolis police, right? That's another issue, right? The racial issue, right? Is a whole nother issue. You have this issue of trafficking with labor and sex. You have abortion. You have divorce. You have pick your issue.
Yeah.
Right? All these different, and that can become very overwhelming. Just like that one issue of trafficking that you were hit in the face with in India could be so overwhelming that you just put it away. Now you add on top of it all these different platforms.
Right.
So let's talk about that. How, as a follower of Jesus,
yeah,
as a man that's saying, I want to make an impact and a difference with my life, what do we do with all that? Let's go there if we could.
Yeah, we can unpack that quite a bit. I think when my thought is when you really lean, and you're getting really close to Jesus Christ, and you're hearing his whispers, You are there as a disciple, listening to his words, and you're reading his word, open to his word and open to his heart. It's going to transform you. He's going to transform you. You're incapable of not having him transform you, but you got to lean in. You got to lean in. You got to lean into that and listen to the word. And I think that Christ, I believe, and I know this for a fact, and to be true, he cared about everything. He didn't just care about blacks and whites and Asians and Hispanics and Indians or whatnot. He cared about everyone. He cared about the world. For God so loved the world, not for God so loved white people, not for God so loved, the shorter Asian guy or whatever. God so loved the world that what did he do? He gave his son. And when Christ walked, there was no discrimination in how he healed, how he spoke, who he spoke to, what he did. There was just no discrimination along the way. One of the things I really appreciate about the word is that they would put in there, and he felt compassion. He saw it, and it impacted him. It impacted him. So putting, you were saying earlier, man, I just want to, put yourself in the shoes of that person that was a leper, or the woman that was committing adultery, the woman at the well, or you're talking about the tax collector, or you're talking about Pharisees, or you're talking about anyone who is, living in sin. He had compassion upon that. And I know as a man, this is where I fall. I just get flat out angry. I just get indignant about something. I'm just like, and I want to do something about it. But I think if I lean into Christ a little bit more, yes, do I have the opportunity to have righteous anger and anger against the injustice? Yes, but then Christ is going to bring in compassion. See, if we're open up to the compassion of it, then maybe God can walk us through all of these different types of cares. I think we should care about a lot of things. I think we should care that abortion is happening right now. We should care about that. And I think we should care that people are being exploited, children, adults being exploited for sex. I think we should care that there's racism. There are people out there who are, utilizing a color of a skin for whatever that is. And I think we should care about domestic violence. There's a lot of things to care about. Poverty, in that. But if our hands are open to God, I think God then brings along the opportunities and the people to do something about it. Are you just willing to step in? And when we lean into Christ, our capacity to care grows. Our compassion capacity grows. Our empathy grows. I know that I was a lot less empathetic prior to finding out about trafficking. I mean, that's really been a huge part of my growth in compassion and empathy is that. I know a lot of survivors here in Denver. I sit down and have lunch, breakfast, dinner with them. I've had them speak at my conferences. I talk to them on the phone and say, how did you get trafficked at 5 years old? What happened at 5? Tell me about your life at 5. When that police officer trafficked you, tell me about that. When you went to the party and you got drugged and then you found yourself in a different state, tell me about that. Tell me about your mother's boyfriend trafficking you when you were 6 years old. Tell me about, I want to know. And my compassion is growing as I step in.
And I would say this, because the examples you provided are putting yourself in the position of the victim. And I think that's fairly easy. Well, it's not easy. It's more natural to go there. What's more difficult is to put that same application onto the perpetrator.
Yeah.
And say, what happened in their life that brought them to this point, that they are now doing this, right?
Exactly.
What in the world unfolded? And again, I'm not, please hear me when I say this, I'm not defending what that police officer did to that gentleman in the street and murdered him in the street. But what I can't help but do, I can't help but think, what has transpired in this guy's life that would take him to a point where he would feel okay about placing his knee into the back of a neck of a gentleman till the point where his last breath escapes his body.
Yeah.
That's, you follow me?
Absolutely.
That's harder to go there than to put yourself in the place of the victim.
You know what I'm thinking about is, and it's funny, we had the exact same thought on this deal, is I'm thinking about how Jesus, in the same scenario, handled the victim and the system differently.
Yeah.
The woman caught in the act of adultery.
Yeah.
The same scenario, he had compassion on the woman and he passed judgment on the religious system that said stone her. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
He said, oh, you don't have sin? The one that doesn't have sin, cast the first stone. Oh, that system doesn't really work, does it? So in a way, he was having compassion on them because he's pointing out, listen, this religious thing that you're relying on to judge her is wrong.
Yeah.
It doesn't
You
work.
didn't understand what I meant when I set that system up, right?
We say this. I've been saying this for a long time here. Is that a 55-year-old man is a 55-year-old white man, married, 2 kids, and has about $150,000 salary is your typical buyer of a victim, right? Average girl in the United States is 12 to 14 years old, right? That is being trafficked, and then they're being trafficked right in their neighborhoods, right here in Denver, Colorado, right? They're being trafficked right here. A 25-year-old pimp doesn't just wake up one day and say, this is what I'm going to do. A 55-year-old buyer doesn't wake up someday and say, I can't wait to do this. And an 18-year-old girl, 14-year-old girl doesn't say, I can't wait for this. No one's living their dream. No one is living their dream at that moment. No one is living their dream, and it takes time to get there. So to have compassion on the story of the gentleman who is the perpetrator, there's got to be room for that. Now there are people who are just flat out demonically possessed and they just do crazy stuff, right? And there's all that, and there has to be a justice system that says when you commit a crime, sorry, these are the consequences. Right? This is the consequence. You murder, this is what happens. You rape, this is what happens. You sell drugs, this is what happens. That's the deal. When you buy the drug or you buy the victim or you're the demand. Well, how's a 55-year-old man married with 2 kids decide he wants to have sex with a 5-month-old baby? How does he decide that? I have an FBI friend of mine who did a sting about 1.5 years ago, and got a 5-year-old child, saved a 5-year-old daughter, and her sister, who was 5 months old. He said, that's the youngest I've ever saved, right here in Denver. Right here in Denver, in a hotel. Set up a sting, 5 months old. Guess who was the pimp? It was the family's babysitter. It's happening here. So with that, how does the young boy, who's the babysitter, who's the boy, babysitter, get to a situation where he thinks it's okay to babysit his neighbor's children that they trusted, get online and sell them?
Let's talk about this. I'm glad you went there. And we started to unpack this before we turned on the cameras.
Yeah.
And I think it's a fascinating topic, and it's this. Somewhere buried in there is a promise.
Yeah. We're talking about that, yeah.
Right? So that babysitter that did this, somehow, somewhere along the line, he bought into a promise, right? For that drug addict that is inserting heroin into his or her arm, there's a promise in that they bought into.
A lie promise.
For that person that's addicted to pornography, for what fill in the blank. I don't need to fill in the blanks for people. But what happens is somehow, some way, somewhere along the line, we bought into a promise and we've said, you know what, I'm willing to put aside all these other things in order to pursue that promise. Only to find that promise is not a promise at all.
Right.
In actuality, it's a great lie. But somewhere intellectually we bought into it. Let's talk about that, because really I believe that's the root of all of this. You know, as we talked about, and we've talked about on previous episodes, our battle is not against flesh and blood.
Right.
Our battle is not against that police officer that stood on the neck of that man. The battle is not against that young man that was selling these kids. It's really not. There's something deeper at a spiritual level. And so instead of attacking the individual, which we want to do, right? The warrior in us says, bring them on.
Yeah.
I'll teach them a lesson, right? That's honestly what I feel like. That's my initial response. But Scripture tells us, no. Your focus is in the wrong place. This is a spiritual war. Let's talk about the promise that we buy into.
Yeah, I think Jeff, when you are looking at the way that we sort of function as humans, and we are spiritual creatures, right? We are spiritual creatures who have a body, not a body who happens to have a spirit. We are a spirit that happens to have a body. That's a quote taken from Francis Chan. He's another Asian guy that you need to bring on here someday. But
Hook us up, man. Connect us.
Is that Paul talks about renewal of the mind, right? And so I know a lot of times in coaching or when you do mentorship, the greatest distance is between here and here. Mm-hmm. The greatest distance is between here and here, and so somewhere along the line we buy into this lie promise that the heroin, the sex, the porn, I'm individual and I can do anything I want. I have just carte blanche on anything that I can do. Carte blanche on anything.
It's the American dream.
It's the American dream. I can do it all up here. But here's the thing: when we start buying into it enough, it starts to seep into the heart. Yeah. And what we need to do is take that vaccine of Jesus Christ, which is the promise that is true, right? Heroin's going to be like this. He's like, hey man, here's the deal. You've had a tough day, or you got these things, or you want to just get high. I'm going to let you know something. You're going to feel good, and the dopamines and all these things are going to fly through your system. The chemicals are going to fly through your system. But in about X time, you're going to have to come back. Mm-hmm. You have to come back to me. I'm sorry, it didn't last as long as didn't last as long. And then every time you do dope, or every time you do heroin, or every time you do porn, you need to do what? A little bit deeper.
Mm-hmm.
You need to raise it up. You need to ratchet it up. Because the lie, we're so pursuing that lie because we gotta have it, we want it. But what's interesting is that heroin, porn, those addictions never can say this, what Christ said on the cross. It is done. See, heroin can't produce that promise. It can't be like, it's done. I got you. You're in a good spot. Porn can't do it. I got you. You're in a good spot. Porn's going to be like, come back. Come on. Do it again. And I promise you it'll be better. Mm. But the crazy thing is once you watch enough porn, you got to ratchet it up. Mm-hmm. So that promise didn't even come true. Right? The climax isn't as high. The high isn't as high. And eventually, you're going to watch enough pornography that it has to jump off the screen. Now, I'm not saying everyone who watches porn becomes a buyer, but something's going to happen. It's going to get weird. It's just going to get weird.
Well, this is a scientific fact that the fastest growing age group for erectile dysfunction is not guys over 60.
No.
It's the millennials. Yep. It's the 18 to 35 year old, 28 or whatever that range is. It's that group of men that what's actually happening in the brain is it doesn't have the ability to become excitable any longer because we've desensitized the brain to what excites us.
And then when it becomes dangerous is when it becomes a heart issue. That was a heart issue from the get-go.
Yeah.
It was a heart issue from the get-go. But when the heart starts to believe it as much as your brain, and these two are functioning together for that lie, that's when it gets really dangerous.
Well, that's why you mentioned it. That's why Scripture says transformation begins with a renewal of the mind. Because as we change the way we think, it impacts our heart and our soul. Well, specifically, that word for heart there is the soul, right? It's our mind and our emotions and our will. Mm-hmm. All those things reside in this place, and this is the gateway to this.
Right.
And if we're going to change the way we think, if we're going to change the way we respond to become more compassionate, if we're going to change ultimately our will, which is driven by the flesh, that's how we're born by default. If we're going to change all those things, it's not by being more disciplined, stronger willed. It's not any of those things. It's quite the opposite. Paul says you got to change. Yep. You got to change the way we think first.
I was just going to add to that. I love how you describe that cycle. That I can almost see the drip from the brain to the heart. But that third piece of that, because if it was just that, it would be this closed, self-contained system that says the things that are seeping into my heart, well, that doesn't affect anyone else. There's nothing human on the other side of that, right? And it's not really that until I go make that purchase, until I act out. But the Bible says that out of the abundance of the heart, drip, 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 The mouth speaketh, the mouse clicketh, the feet walketh, the outcome happens.
Yep.
Right? And so it's not this benign thing that just happens here that says,
Yeah.
well, I'm poisoning myself, but that's my choice.
Yeah. It's not a small island. You're not the only one on the island. Mm-hmm. Right? Because you're affecting it. So here's the deal. You watch pornography. I'm going to show you exactly how that all works. So here are the people. Someone's filming it. Someone's producing it. Someone's making money on it. And then the girl gets zero of it. Okay? And the boys or whatever, maybe they get a cut. I don't know how that all works out, but it gets up there. And you're watching this. You're watching this video. Okay, so if you're not married, it's going to change your perspective and perception of women and sex and romance and love. It's going to mess with you. If you are married, it's going to change your view on romance and sex, and it's going to mess with you. And so that's just that linear component of just that. Now, to your point, what's that boy or girl who's watching it going to affect others? Right? How is she going to talk about porn? How is he going to talk about porn? How are they going to talk about sex? How are they going to treat each other along the way as they consume another human? The boy who's having sex with the girl, or the girl who's having sex with the boy, whatever, either way, both of those that are being part of it, there's collateral damage out of that.
No question.
And then the producer, if it's produced, has collateral damage out of
It's
that.
the ripple effect.
It's the ripple effect. And we have to know more about the topic to understand. It's just, I love what you said, it's not just this isolated vacuum of just, it's just me. I'm sorry, no, it's you and all the people around you, because I guarantee you also it's going to change. Pornography is going to change the way you think, because it is an instant gratification, self-indulgent, selfish act. And you don't think it's going to bleed into your business decisions? The decisions you make with your kids? What you do at church? 40% of pastors are watching pornography. Sorry. Youth group leaders. You don't think it's going to change the way teachers, coaches, principals, entrepreneurs, all that is going to start changing the way they start making decisions.
No question.
So it's collateral.
So what, John, what do you say? I want to shift this into a place of action, okay? What do you say to the person that says, you know what, I've got my platform. I stand for abortion.
Yes. Against it. Or for it.
Or for
either
it.
one. Yeah,
either way.
Yep.
Or, I'm going to stand against trafficking.
Yeah.
I'm going to stand against whatever injustice, for racial discrimination. They're all justifiable things that we need to stand up for, and we need to provide a voice to. We need to bring attention and awareness and money and legislation and all the things that we need.
Right.
What do you say to that person says, I got my platform. I don't need another platform? Or to take it even a step further, says, I got my platform and I care about this, but literally I don't really even have to care or worry about these other things. You touched on it earlier, but let's expound upon that, and then let's talk about what is the person out there that's watching this going, you know what, I want to have the heart of Jesus and I want to make a difference.
Right.
But it's just me. I'm a guy that's 28 years old and I'm trying to start my career and I don't have any money and I don't really have a big network of people. I can't, start a bill, whatever.
Yeah.
What do you say to those people? So let's go there.
There's a lot of entry points and a lot of things, but when it comes to specifically with sex trafficking, you're right. It is difficult. You're not a law enforcement. You're probably not a counselor. You probably don't run a restoration home. But here's what you can do. You can get online and look up local anti-trafficking organizations. Find out what they need. We have to understand that it's not just one child in Denver. They just rescued over 30,000 minors 3 weeks ago in only 3 cities. There was a national sting, 30,000 minors. Why is anyone talking about that? 30,000 minors. So children. But no one's talking about that. I don't want to take away any of the other stories, but should that not also be a story?
I love that this conversation is modeling the solution.
Yeah.
We sort of fall into, develop our own little religious system, our own paradigm on the world, if you will, right? This conversation opened up for us. We knew a little bit about it because we've talked with you enough about it.
Yeah.
Certainly opened up for some of the viewers out there, this whole new world of, oh my gosh, this is actually happening.
Yeah.
But if we can get in the habit of having that conversation about racial injustice, as another example, right? I don't know what it's like to be in the skin of another person, okay? So what's my duty? It's not to project on them what I think they should feel or what I think they should experience because that's what I experience, but it's to ask them, like, help me get in your skin.
Let me suggest this as we wrap today is what I've heard today is that one of the keys to unlocking the injustice, unlocking the anger, unlocking the separation and the division is compassion.
I think that's a huge component. It really is.
And I was just talking to a group this morning, and I was talking about this very issue of compassion. And I think one of the most beautiful places that compassion is exemplified in Scripture is out of Luke 15. It's the story of the prodigal son, right? And we've heard plenty of sermons, and we talked about the prodigal son, and we oftentimes think about this story from the son's perspective. This idea that he is broken and he's squandered his inheritance, and he goes through this issue, and Scripture says that he finally eventually comes to himself, right? And he says, you know what, I gotta go home, even if it means that I'm going to be treated as a slave. It's better than the life that I have, right? And he's in the pigsty, and he's thinking about this speech that he's going to deliver to his father when he gets back to somehow, some way convince his father that he can come back into graces. And as he begins to move back home, as he starts to move back towards the home, it says that while he was still a ways off, the father saw him and was filled with compassion.
Yep.
And it wrecked the older son, didn't it? Because what his father modeled, and it's the heart of Jesus, right? It's the heart of God, and it's the heart that we're trying to capture here, is that notice the father didn't even allow the son to deliver his speech.
Yeah.
Good point.
He just poured out compassion.
Yeah.
And in the heart of the father was, son, I can't even begin to imagine what you've been through, what you've experienced, what you're feeling. I can't even begin to imagine why you ran, why you chose to take the inheritance, why you blew it on wild living. None of that mattered because the father chose to put himself in a place to go, man, I'm just glad you're back in my presence.
Yeah.
And he sought commonality.
Yeah, exactly.
And the commonality was, we're blood.
Mm-hmm.
We're family. That's all that matters. And we've now been restored. And then he had to deliver that same message to the other son. He said, son, the reason why this is such a beautiful thing, the reason why I've slaughtered the fattened calf, and I've put the robe around his shoulders, and I've given him the signet ring, and all those things, the reason why is because he is my son, and he is home. And that's our commonality.
Yeah. Or I know that when I fought, and then, and you be compassionate to the story. My story is jacked up. I mean, I did a lot of dumb stuff in my life. I mean, a ton of it. And a lot of it is because I have adoption issues and I have abandonment issues. I was left on the street as a child just to survive somewhere in Korea. I don't know. I don't even know my story. I don't know my name. I don't know my birthday. I know nothing about myself. I was just found by the police. I was probably doing something pretty bad. But you know what I'm saying? And I could take that. And I could take all the times that the police pulled me over. I could take all my bullying. I could take the legalistic lifestyle that I learned about Jesus through my parents. I could take all those things and I could dump them on you. And be like, you know nothing about me.
It's bitterness.
It's bitter. Mm-hmm. But I also could take that and go, surrender. And then here's the commonality between us. And I have compassion for your story as well. Because if I have compassion for your story, maybe you'll have compassion for my story. And so when we look at porn, do we not have compassion for the girl who's being raped? And are we not having compassion for the guy who's getting paid to do this job? When we sell each other and consume each other, man, that's a great evil. That's a great evil. And it's an evil amongst two. It's an evil to each other. You know. So,
man, Johnny, thank you again for deciding to join us here today. But we went all kinds of angles, and I'm going to pray and trust that if you're watching or listening to our episode today, that the Holy Spirit's going to speak to you, and there's going to be some nuggets that you're going to take. And I'm just going to encourage you to press into it. As John said today, press into this. Press into this. And I think our greatest prayer coming out of this discussion maybe is Father, give us the heart of compassion.
yeah.
That we can begin to see each other as you see us. Because once we gain that perspective, I think everything will change. Hey, thanks for joining us on The Pursuit. Make sure you go on YouTube, hit subscribe. There's a little bell right next to that subscription. You click on that and you click on all, you'll get a notification every time we put out a new episode. And you want to talk about our website?
Make sure you hit us on our website, thepursuitonline.com, and hit subscribe there. And if you would, drop your email address in there so we can stay in more regular communication. Also, there's going to be tools and resources out there that are not available on the website. So we'd love to stay in communication with you through the mechanism of the website.
All right. We'll see you next time.
See ya.